Hello and welcome. I'm going to be showing you how I paint Blood Angels Assault Intercessors, the ones that are in the Indomitus box set. There's 10 of them altogether. A sergeant, he's got no helmet, the rest of them have got helmets, they've all got chainswords and bolt pistols. The sergeant's got a plasma pistol. Yeah, this is how I paint them. Okay, to start off with, I'll give it a black undercoat. I use the Vallejo model colour black as it's quite a matte undercoat and it seems to adhere to most other paint, so the paint stick better to it. So cover it, the whole thing in black everywhere. Next comes the red for the Blood Angels. Mephisto red is what I'm going to use. Once again, paint this over the whole miniature, but try and avoid anywhere that is going to be black later on. Just saves a little bit of time. If you do get any red paint on them black bits, just go over it again with a little bit of black just to tidy it up. You may have to go over a couple of times with the red, thin it down a little just so it goes on nice and smooth. Let's say couple of coats just to give it a nice solid finish. Okay, once that's done, I tidied up all the black again where I'd got a bit of red on it. Next is Agrex Earthshade. Now this I'm going to use not only as a shade for the finer recesses, but to filter the red on there. So anywhere where it's a bit more shadow, it's got a little bit more of a darker red. To go over the whole model, but try and keep it nice and smooth so you don't get any blotchy parts with it. Again, avoiding any of the black, but not the end of the world if you get a bit on the black, you won't really see it. As I say, I'm using quite a small brush here, you may be thinking why, but that's just so I can get a nice even finish on there. Again, if you do make a mistake here, we're going to be going over it again afterwards. Okay, give it a good half hour to dry as it's quite wet, the washes are. Once it's dry, you'll see that it's gone into all the recesses and it's made all the red a lot darker than what it was before. So now we're just going to highlight everywhere by going over any bit that's raised up with the Mephisto red again. So it's like a big edge highlight basically, any of the raised areas, but just avoid the recesses and a little bit outside the recesses. And water it down just a little bit, just so it's smooth enough to come off the brush. That kind of big ball joint, I'll go over most of that, just leave the lowest part of it just with a little bit of that shade on it. Again, that's a good example. That whole section there is going to catch a lot of light, so the whole thing I'm going to do red, but in the finest recesses just leave that wash in there. And then carry on over the whole model, leaving a little bit of shadow where needed, but generally just filling most of that in, leaving the recesses. And over this little shield, just try and avoid going around the little rivets, just to add a bit of shadow around them. Right, again, once that's all dried, next we're going to go on to edge highlighting. So I use quite a detail brush for that, but I use the edge of the brush rather than the tip. But now we're looking at all the sharpest parts of the model, anywhere where there's almost a 90-degree angle. For that, we use Wild Rider Red. If you wanted to add a step in, you could be using Evil Sun Scarlet here first and then use Wild Rider Red, but I want to get them finished. As they're only infantry models, I won't be going into too much detail with them. Now this I very rarely add any water to, but have a very small amount on the brush. As I say, use the edge of the brush rather than the tip and scoot over any of the sharper parts. Any surfaces that are sticking out that have got an edge to it. Good example, that knee again. Along most of the armour, you're going to have them sharp surfaces. So just look around for them, pick them out. Once you've done all of them, it'll make a big difference. The red will look completely different. It'll give it a whole new life. And then next, we're going to highlight the highlights. Fire Dragon Bright. Use that in the way of the edge highlights again, where you've just done them, but only on the sharpest parts of it or the highest parts where the light would hit more. So I'll do this knee first, and you can see I'll just do sort of the top third of it. So where the light hits, it hits there, it's the brightest point, and then the edges go a little bit duller. When the camera focuses, you'll be able to see how it looks. And then you just go around the rest of the model, any sharp corners or raised parts. Just put a little bit on there. Once you've been around the whole model, done all the different parts, that's it for the red. That's it done. You don't have to do any more to it. Now we can move on to something else. As you can see there, it really has made a lot of difference. On the knee especially, it's going around the edge of it, even where there's not sharp parts, and just adding a little bit of a highlight does really make a difference. So next I'm going to use a dark silver. Well, I'll use lead belcher, but use any dark silver you've got. And then to do any of the metallic parts, things like the engine on the chainsaw and the teeth on the chainsaw, the vox bead around his face, the metal arm, the bionic arm. Now I usually do main part of the weapon with metallic, but as his arm's going to be, it'd look a bit weird. So I'm going to leave the actual gun black, but maybe just do a small bit of it with a metallic, so it doesn't kind of blend in with the arm. It's still a definite difference. Also, all the vents on the backpack need doing. Any sort of clasps or anything like that there is around. Just go around the model, look for the different bits, and if you find them, just paint them now. Right, so that's done and dry. So we've got, like I said, the box around his face, got the arm, a little bit of the gun, all them vents. There's a little clasp at the back there. There's a little pipe under his shoulder pad, all around the sword. Yeah, so now to add a little bit of shading and weathering, we'll use Nuln Oil. You can highlight after this, but I want it to look dirty and used, so I'm not going to do the highlight. Just leave the Nuln Oil to kind of go where it pleases. Just give it an oily, dirty, used look. Okay, so once all that's done, I've done the teeth because I'd forgot them earlier. All them little bits, everything's Nuln Oil, just gives it that little bit more of a natural look, or used look should I say. So now we're looking at all the black bits. as I say, every stage I've gone through, if I've got anything on the black, I've redone the black. So next, first highlight is dark repot, and it's going to be exactly the same as we did with the red, just with dark repot, and then the smaller highlight with Thunderhawk blue. So exactly we did with the red, just go over the whole model, anywhere that's black, any sharp surfaces, just add a little bit, like a very fine line on the sharpest of the surface. Okay, so now you notice a little bit of a symbol on his left hand. And just to highlight that out a bit, I'm going to use Retributor armor. I was going to do it on the silver again, but I wanted it to stand out a little more. So I'm just going to use this Retributor armor, which is a nice paint. It's one of the better metallics by Games Workshop. Covers really nicely. Generally in one coat, so yeah, it's one of the better ones. If anyone's got any really good ones, please let me know. Just cover the whole thing, the whole little pattern. Don't worry about shading, we can do that later and use everything else. Remember to try and move the model rather than put your brush in a difficult position. That makes a big difference. Right, next one. This is a pain. Uriel yellow, don't know if I'm saying that right. But we've got the helmet that's sat on his back, but obviously all the others wearing the helmets. So paint that whole thing with yellow. And then the actual chainsaw, I'm going to put hazard stripes on it. Now this is a little bit of trial and error. Sometimes you go too far, you have to put the black on. You could tape it off, but it's difficult to get tape that fine. So I'll just do it freehand. Do the diagonal lines down one side. Start off at the top and then fill the whole thing in once you've done the line and you're happy with it. Now you've got to go down a bit and try and even out the lines. So again, do the next line. And then another one and fill out in between. This will need a couple of coats because yellow is very thin. Next, you just want to go straight over the back from the edge of the yellow, like that. And now what you can do is check to where it goes on the teeth and then go to the same place. So you've roughly got the same pattern and in the same place. And then just fill it all in. And you just got to do one more down the bottom. And then fill them in again. That's what it looks like when it's all done. As you can see, I had moved them up a little bit. It weren't perfect, so. Right, next, Rhinoxide Flesh Shade. This is, again, first to give that gold a little bit of a wash over, just to give it a bit of shading. And also with the yellow, it gives it a bit more of a dirty look. Because that bright yellow kind of just looks out of place. So it just browns it off a little bit. Just so it's not like it's freshly stamped out the factory. Just move it about until you get it to a stage where you're happy with it. Obviously the same on the helmet. Again, just push them pigments into them recessed areas. If they're not going in the right place, just push them around If there's too much on there, just wash your brush off, dry off, and just sort of pad it up, soak it up. Just get them in the right place that you're happy with, and then it saves a lot of time re-going over it later. Right, so now with that done, it takes a little while to dry, but next we can go on to Tessalist Blue. This is just for the light coming from the plasma gun. Obviously this is the only model that you'll need this on. Once you've done the base coat of that small area, you could add a bit of a light effect and go a bit further with a bit of a watered down version, but again, I'll just want this. This is just an infantry model. I'm not going to put too much effort into this one. Anywhere I've gone over a little bit, I just tidy up with a bit of a wet brush. If you go over the black too much, just paint the black back on and any of the highlights that you need. Okay, right, now that's done. Just to highlight that bit of Lothern blue, just again on the sharpest edges. Remember, we've not washed this, so that first blue is kind of the recessed wash colour, and then just highlight it with this blue. Again, it's such a small area, doesn't have to be the most amazing job, it's not really going to be very noticeable. Right, once that's done, I'm going to start working on the face. So Pugman's Glow, just to give it a base coat all over the flesh. Okay, so once that's done, we're going to go to Ratkoth Flesh, and this is just for any of the scrolls and the seals, for the purity seals, the oath papers. Just get them a quick going over with this Ratkoth Flesh. Come back and give it a wash when it's dried. Okay, now for the eyes on the helmet. I'm going to start off with Warpstone Glow. Just really take your time with this. Just use the tip of the brush, tiny bit of water on there, just so it's smooth enough to come off easily. And then just, nice thing is they're nice long eye lenses, so start in one corner and work your way to the other. Once you're about halfway, turn it around and start in the other corner. You can usually get it done reasonably quickly and reasonably tidy. Okay, so once that's done, just give it a small highlight with moot green. A nice tip, just a tiny amount on the end of the brush, and go from the front of the eye to about the middle, just in the middle, just to give it a little bit of highlight at the front. Now it's time to highlight the Bugman's Glow with Cadian Flesh Tone. Here we're going to go over pretty much the whole of the flesh, the skin, but leave the recesses and anywhere around the edges. So just go over it a bit at a time. Right, once it's dried, give it a nice decent wash with Rhinoxide Flesh. Okay, so next just a final highlight on all the skin, on all the raised edges, on the eyebrows, on the top of the head. I'm going to use Cadian Flesh. It's just a slightly lighter tone than the Cadian Flesh tone. Just a small amount on the brush, water it down nicely just so it flows really easily on there. Just on the top of the head, where he's just under his mohawk sort of thing. Eyebrows are a big one, or the overhang of the eye, the tip of the nose, anywhere where there's creases on his forehead, go on the raised bumps of it. Cheeks, if his ears are showing, do the ears. But yeah, just go around the whole of the face, any of them raised areas, cheekbones, just get them and just highlight them up a bit. It shouldn't take too long. It's not a lot here to do, but it is quite detailed, so just go over it, make sure you've got all the different bits, and then once it's dried, once again go over it with Rhinoxide Flesh. It just ties all them 3 different flesh tones, it just ties them all in together. It just makes them look a lot smoother. If you really wanted to, you could go over it again with Cadian Flesh, just tiny little bits, just to give it a little bit more of a highlight. Right, so next it's Rhinoxide. You don't have to use Rhinoxide, just use a dark brown colour. You can mix with a bit of brown and black, however you want to do it. Just use a really fine detail brush, get a bit of water on it so it really flows it well from the brush. What you're aiming to do on the little parchment paper, just do dots in a line basically, as it's tiny writing. And take a little bit of time to get the hang of it. So take your time with it. Like I say, plenty of water is a good trick, but not too much on the brush. Use your palette just to get the right amount on there, and even test it out on the palette if you need to. Just keep going until you got a decent number of lines and it looks like there's something wrote on there. also going to use that colour to base coat his hair. Again, you can use a different brown, it doesn't really matter. Right, now I'm going to use an old colour I found because it needs using up. It's just a lighter brown, Calthan brown. I must have had that for years, and well, it needs using up, so that's the only reason I'm using it. And that's just to give it almost a little bit of a dry brush and an edge highlight on the hair. I'm not going to bother washing the hair. I don't want too much detail going into it. I think you can overdo it on the hair. It shouldn't be like that. Right, now I'm going to get the lead voucher back out. And the service studs just above his eye, just a tiny dot. That's all it needs. You still have a bit of a shade from the Rhinoxide flesh shade. And that's pretty much the model painting done. Next, we've just got to find the right transfers. Again, because he's the sergeant, he has yellow transfers on the black shoulder pad, whereas the normal ones will have the black transfers on red shoulder pad. You'll see the others in a bit. And then I'm just going to use the yellow blood drop on the other side. So cut them out, drop them in the water. Doesn't take too long for them to release from the backing paper. Just give them a minute or so. What I use is some tweezers to hold the backing paper and then a brush to brush it off onto the miniature. It can be a bit of a nightmare to pick up, but once you get it into a decent grip, then you've got a lot more control over it. I'm just testing it there, make sure it is moving and it's going to slide off. Another big thing is getting the miniature in the right position, just to make it easier to slide it off. There you go, the piece of paper, models in this same line, just simple slide off. While it's still quite wet, you can move it into the right position. Once you've got it there, just start pressing the edges down and then push out from the middle just to flatten it off as much as you can. You find when it's going around, a flat transfer is going around a round object, you will get little folds in it almost, but try and flatten it out as much as possible. Again, as you can see, I'm putting the model in the right position to make it easier to drop that transfer off. Plenty of water on there just so I can move it about, and then I can soak a bit of the water up with a brush by drying the brush off on a bit of towel. There we go, so they're in position. Let them dry off a bit. I did forget the shield on the front, so I'm just going to have a look through the transfers and what better to put on there. Try and measure it up. My technical measuring device. What have I got spare? Oh look, a skull. Can't beat a skull. So I do the exact same with that. As you can see, I've used a lot of them transfers up already. These are actually the miniatures from the Indomitus box set, well, the Space Marine miniatures that I've got to paint. So I'm kind of looking for something new to paint now. I've painted some of the Necrons, but yeah. Right, so I'm going over these again just to make sure they're nice and flat. While they're still wet, you can still move them a little bit. As they dry out, it becomes a bit more difficult. Again, this one's a nice one because it's going onto a nice flat surface. Not much of a problem there. Just try and get it in the middle as much as possible. And flatten it out. Okay, so right, once all them are dry, get some Decal Softener. I'm sure there's loads of different versions of this, but I use the Vallejo one. It's an alcohol-based product, so just don't use your best brush for it. And then, as I was before, go from the middle and just flatten it off. It just flattens it off, makes it a bit smoother, lowers the edges down. Just keep going over it until you somewhere where you like. If you do put too much on, the transfer can move, so put a bit on and just brush it in. You can see I do it with all of them. Next, once that's dry, a bit of lime medium. This sounds weird, but that's the resin that's in the paint. So I'm going to go over each of the transfers with the lime medium. It kind of seems pointless, but it will have a big effect. So once that's done and dried, we're pretty much good to go. Next, I'm just going to add some scratches, weathering, things like that. Just make it a little bit more. I mean, that's ready. If you want to stop there, feel free. Right, so with the scratches, dry a block, a nice dark brown is what we want first. What you're looking for is this part of it will make the scratches look deep. So any scratches you want to put on there, I usually start at the bottom, work on the legs. Any of the sharp edges, just sort of dot it on. There's different ways of doing this damage. You can use sponges to dab it around the edges, that works quite well. On a smaller model, I'll just use a brush. I've got a lot more control over it. You can even go over the transfers to make them look more part of the armor. Just go a few scratch lines over it. Yeah, I messed up a little bit there, so just wet the brush again and knocked it off and started again. And as you could probably already tell, I do eat quite a lot of paint. But it's just easy and convenient. Yeah, then on the elbows, anywhere where you would get damage, anything that sticks out really. Try and do claw marks and things like that. Any sort of wear on the edges. Just a couple of scratches here and there randomly. And what I also did is I went back and done along the edge of the chainsaw, because obviously that's seen a lot of action, a lot of things rubbing against it. So where the yellow and black hazard stripes are, I went along the edge of that near the teeth. Yeah, again, I wanted to go through the transfers a bit just to make them look part of the model. Right, so all of them now we'll highlight with the brightest highlight colour, which was the Fire Dragon Bright. That gives you the sense of depth on them. So at the top edge, the highest edge, just put a little line going across the top of each of the scratches. And you can even add a few shallower scratches with just that, but just make sure they're nice and fine and small. Any of the deeper scratches, you can then add some of the dark silver to. I'm using lead belcher again. So if they're deeper scratches, you want to go fill part of the brown in, the bottom part of the brown in, or anywhere around the edges. Right, next, it's just a case of basing it. I like these new stands because you can just pop them out like that. Chop that little peg off. with a blade. Careful not to cut your hands. Just sharpen, flatten it off. A little bit of super glue. Sometimes easier to do it that way. And pop him on. I mean, I made that base so just for that model because I knew he'd stand on one bit. You can use an activator to get the super glue to set a bit quicker, but yeah, there we go. The next thing I found out was actually by accident. It was when I was making the base for the others. Because I've made them with real cement, I had cement on my fingers and I picked one of the models up and I got dust all over it. So I thought, hey, why not use some of the cement and add a bit of powdering to it just to weather it a little bit more, make it look dustier. So I've gone over and this stuff's quite good. You can brush it and then keep brushing it if you don't like it on there until it's basically come off. Try and get a bit in, like a bit of grime in the edges and things like that. I'm hoping with a bit of time and a bit of moisture in the air it should stick to it, because I haven't stuck it down yet, but time will tell. If not, I'll just use a little bit of water and spray it on, maybe like a little humidifier or something. Yeah, just go around it wherever you want, a bit of powder, because they're in a ruined city and there's going to be powder kicked up from the fighting and things like that. And by the looks of them, with all the scratches, they've been there for a while, so they ain't going to be clean. So yeah, just a little bit of that. As you can see, I knock a load off, put a load on, knock it off until I'm happy with it. There we go. Literally the next thing is to do the rest of them. And that's the finished squad. All got unique bases on them. If you want to see how to do them, I've made a little video of them, but it's not very good. Use some water effects on some and things like that. So yeah, I'll put a link in the description to where you can get these in the UK at half decent price. I don't think you get the exact same ones as them, but yeah. Thanks for watching and expect more videos soon.